And so I said, we've got to do poverty reduction. We also have to do youth engagement along with law enforcement. So it was a struggle sometimes to convince people that what I was saying is the pathway to deliver on what we want in this city. So our poverty has dropped from 17% since I took office down to less than 13%. We've had a dramatic reduction in crime and youth engaged violent crime. There's no question. It's down. Being a person of color, you also face an initial challenge, and I faced an initial challenge of folks, it's kind of second guessing your decision making, maybe a strategy or things like that, because it's new. Why is that so important to me? Because we are saving lives every single day.
Welcome back to the Black Oregon POV podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Poinsett, and this is the show where I ask the big questions and explore the big ideas about Black life in Oregon with a special guest. Today's episode is part of a special series on Black mayors in Oregon. As I record this, I'm working on a story for Street Roots where I interview 5 current and former Black Oregonian mayors. In total, Oregon has had 9 Black mayors who have represented Manzanita, Sheniko, Depot Bay, King City, River Grove, Albany, Gresham, Garibaldi, and Oregon City. This episode features my interview with Gresham Mayor Travis Stovall. Stovall was elected in 2020, is currently serving in his second term, and is up for re-election this year.
How would you describe Gresham, and what would you say are some of the biggest issues facing your constituents?
So Gresham in general it's the fourth largest city in the state. Most folks don't know that. When they hear Gresham, they think smaller community, rural, somewhat urban. But Gresham is actually the fourth largest city in the state, 115,000 folks, and the second largest in the Portland metro region on the Oregon side. So Vancouver is the second largest when you include the entire metro area. So that brings to mind a growing community with complex challenges and lots of benefits. When you think about communities, you think about towns and cities. Many times you think about the amenities that come with a city. And that's why you live in cities, because of the compactness of resources, compactness of services, retail, all of those things you get to utilize in a very compact sort of setting. And then you've got access to schools and hospitals and all these things in regards to access. And so that's what you get when you have cities. And so when you talk about the various benefits and pluses that cities bring individually, you start to look at kind of the feel of it, kind of its own personality. And Gresham historically, was more rural. So you had berries and farms and things like that. Historically, we used to have the county fair out here. So the fairgrounds used to be here in Gresham. And over time, that's changed. As East Portland has grown out, that has actually had an impact on Gresham. Gresham has grown from what would have been back in the older days, 20,000, 30,000, now again up to 115,000. But you still have a downtown that's historic. So you got the Gresham Historic Downtown. You've got Gresham Station, which is, the outdoor kind of what they call lifestyle retail center. That's pretty significant. It's a pretty significant development. So you also have the somewhat urban and ultra urban settings now, which you didn't have. What I mean by that is lots of multifamily housing solutions and inventory and different products. So you've got, the five story nice apartment building. You've got the 2-story that has the external entrance and access to to the various apartments, as opposed to the internal building that's secure. So you've got all these different solutions and all these different products that now exist. You've got everything from executive housing, multi-million-dollar houses, all the way to starter homes and areas that have more affordable solutions for homes and housing. And you've got just a lot of different amenities that exist. Last year, we had our first Trader Joe's open. last October, and that's a big deal for communities to get some of these national entities that are recognizing the growth of your community, and so that's a plus and a benefit that we've seen. We've got other national chains. Probably here in the next few months, we'll see Raising Cane's open, which is a fairly hot retail outlet that many cities are vying for. And then you have In and Out that's also going through the process of permitting, and eventually they'll put a new location in here. Again, that's that national touch of validation of the work we're doing, but we also have a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that are locally owned and grown. And so that's the look and feel. You've got 115,000, roughly falls in the 250th to 275th largest city in the country. So we fall in that 250 range for large cities across the country. So we're large enough to matter, but small enough to make it happen. And we've got that historical small town feel where you go many places around town and you're constantly bumping into people that because it still has these city centers and these kind of displaced centers that people tend to congregate into, that brings that sense of community together. So that's kind of an overview of Gresham. A long overview, but an overview.
No, I appreciate that. It's going back to you're elected in 2021, correct?
Elected in 2020, took office in 21.
Okay. Can you just talk about kind of like the atmosphere around your campaign at the time and being like being the first Black mayor of Gresham, and like you said, like it's probably like a larger city in comparison to, with some of the other people I've talked with for the story, where you're talking about like small, maybe retirement towns and sort of like these smaller areas. So I'm curious what, again, not like how you describe that moment, that time, and like I guess like what support or even pushback looked like.
Yeah, so of course, it's a great question because when you look at 2020, we had a number of things that came to an intersection at that point in time. George Floyd was murdered. We had COVID, and then we also had the wildfires here in the South Metro area. So we had all of these things coming to roost on these in our city, our state, our country, and there was hard work that we needed to do. I was just wrapping up my tenure on the TriMet board, had been there for just over 8 years. And my plan was go back to the private sector and continue on with the rest of life. And I think the good Lord had a different perspective. And the current mayor at the time, Shane Bemis, who I'm a big fan, he was mayor for 14 years in the city of Gresham, was city council for 4 before he became mayor. So 18 years dedicated to public service here in Gresham, city of Gresham leadership. And he stepped down the summer of 2020. And in his resignation letter, he wrote that I don't believe I'm the right person to help lead the city through what it needs to go through. We have now become a very diverse city. Gresham is one of the most diverse cities in the state of Oregon. More than, the number is generally about more than 85 languages are spoken kind of in the compact area of the Rockwood area, West Gresham. And he said, I don't think I'm the right person to help guide our city through the next steps and phases of what it needs to go through, what it has to go through. And he's in his resignation letter, he said, I think Travis Stovall is the person that should run and lead our city forward. And so he reached out and gave me that tremendous vote of confidence. Again, I wasn't planning on running for mayor, and that was in 2020. So it was at a time when things were just incredibly unstable and on so many fronts. And basically, I had to sit with that, because here you have a dominant culture, a leader who has reached out and given his full support to a person of color to lead the city that he loves and that he has led for so many years. You can't, I don't think you can step back from that type of encouragement and that type of motivating force. And so it was the right time for me to step out of the shadows and begin to work with our city, to begin to work with our constituents, to begin to work with our staff, the city council, and really continuing to shape Gresham in ways that would benefit everybody. And I think Shane Bemis, he saw that. He knew that we needed to reshape our city in ways that benefited everybody. And that was the time. That was the perfect time. When I ran for mayor, a number of folks questioned my support of law enforcement. As you remember and recall, 2020 was a big year that folks were, defund the police. From day one, I had no interest in having that conversation. I supported law enforcement uh, prior. I worked a number of different levy campaigns to get law enforcement and our fire department or public safety folks, correctly funded. So that's been my support historically. It was going to be my support going forward. But, folks who saw me assumed I didn't support law enforcement. So it's kind of a challenge because I'm like, hey, we need to fund them correctly. We need to train them right. We need to make sure they reflect our community. That's how you have a great team of folks that are looking to keep our community safe. Well, at the same time, I also said the primary way that we reduce crime is to ensure that we reduce poverty. As we bring community wealth to our community, that is going to be something that absolutely helps in crime reduction. It's not to say if you're in poverty, you're going to commit crime. That's not what it says. But there is a higher probability for criminal behavior if you have to live a life of poverty. And so I said, we've got to do poverty reduction. We also have to do youth engagement along with law enforcement. So it was a struggle sometimes to convince people that what I was saying is the pathway to deliver on what we want in this city. Youth engagement, economic vitality, mobility, and access, along with the things that keep our community safe and vibrant. I also said, hey, parks and recreation, critical component of our that we need in our communities. And so those are the types of things that I said, uh, you know, while I was running for election, and those are the types of things I've worked on since running for election, and being able to become Gresham's mayor. I will say that our poverty has dropped from 17% since I took office down to less than 13%. We've had a dramatic reduction in crime and youth engaged violent crime. I mean, there's no question it's down. We've had one homicide this year so far, and it didn't involve a youth. And so those are the types of things that we now can look back and say it's working. We've brought jobs here. We've brought opportunity here. These are all the things that have now come forth from being able to lead our city forward. And again, I think a heavy dose of it was previous Mayor Shane Bemis, seeing, the potential that I had within me, and then really doing a great job of laying a great foundation, because that was really a big piece of it. If I'd come from the sidelines just with the notion of trying to become mayor without that level of support, it would have been challenging. But you had a dominant culture, trusted, well-liked leader who lended his reputation, his support to someone he thought would do a great job leading the city forward.
And kind of staying on that topic of challenges, in in your tenure so far, what would you say has been your biggest challenge?
Biggest challenge. It's going to sound a little bit interesting because I always say you don't know what you don't know until you're in the role. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I tell people all the time, they ask me, what's the most surprising thing you experienced when you became mayor? The sheer volume of stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Sheer volume. I mean, you think about it when you're in the private sector, which I'm still in the private sector because the mayor role in Gresham is part-time. It's considered part-time. It's not really by no means. When you're in the private sector and you work for a company, you're fairly well focused on that single effort, whatever it is, B2C, B2B, whatever your customer is. If I sell cars, then that's what I do. I sell cars. As a city, you do everything from deliver clean water to sewer services to streets and roads and stoplights to ordinances to sidewalks to parks and recreation, to public safety to fire to street lights. I mean, the list goes on. It's an endless list of things that cities provide. And so I always tell people, your knowledge needs to be an inch deep and a mile wide. I mean, because you have to know a little about a lot. Now, you do get to go deeper on key issues that are really important to you, to the degree that these are the things that you think are the foundational, vital few that's going to move the needle the most. So you do get 3 to 4 issues that you can really go deep on. You can't do that on every issue. And so I say all of that to reference that everything is possible. Everything is possible. But you absolutely have the limitation of bandwidth. While everything's possible, not you cannot complete everything that you want to and you desire to, because it's a process. Politics and democracy by design is slow. It's a slow process, because ultimately, if it was too fast, you wouldn't be listening to the folks that you need to be listening to. You think about some of the things that go on nationally and the speed at which things are get conducted. Well, you can do that if you don't listen to your constituents. If you're not reaching out and utilizing a collective approach to the things you need to work on. And so it's a slow process by design to ensure that we are looking into things. And that's part of the challenge. Part of your challenge is navigating all of that, bringing everybody together, public process, to make sure that you make the right decision, which then limits your capacity to do a lot of things. And so you have to focus. And so that's some of the bigger challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. And I would say you also face being a person of color, you also face an initial challenge, and I faced an initial challenge of folks, it's kind of second guessing your decision making, maybe a strategy or things like that, because it's new. It's new to them. If you've only experienced leadership in a certain way, then when you see something different, you have sometimes an initial response that is, whoa, are we going down the right road? Are we making the right decisions? Is this the right pathway? But I can tell you that our youth engagement program, which is the combination of a lot of great leadership, thoughts and ideas, Commissioner Jones Dixon, who's now over at the county, was at the city when this launched. And so he was a big proponent of it and someone who helped design the components of it. But I could, for the most part, much of what we do as electeds is risk mitigation. We're constantly managing risk. Every decision you make is about risk mitigation. Is this going to be a good decision? Is it going to be a bad decision? Is it going to work out? Is it going to partially work out? You're constantly doing a risk matrix in your head. Even when you don't think you are, you are. And so part of the challenge you have as an elected is, how much support do I put behind an initiative that I don't know much about? So how much support do I put behind an initiative that I don't know much about? So my lived experience, I grew up in the inner city of Kansas City, Kansas, and one of the hardest parts of that region. It was a challenge, but it also informed me on many of the things that today I leverage to inform my decision making. So it wasn't a big risk for me to go down and talk to Salem and the legislature about investing $2 million annually into our youth engagement program, because I'd lived it. It's what helped save me from a pathway that wasn't going to turn out, the way it should and could. And so I had the confidence that if we invested in youth engagement, we would eventually get a return on that investment. I thought it would be a little bit of a gap in time, but it was almost immediate. We saw a benefit almost immediate. And so that's part of the biggest challenge, is being able to work on some of these key initiatives that will have a positive benefit, but you have to go through a lot of process to be able to get some of those things to happen. And that's somewhat discouraging sometimes, just because if you didn't have to go through sometimes this enormous process of talking to so many people, you could get more done. But the flip side of that, if you're not talking to folks, you're not understanding, you're not getting the insight. And if an elected believes they have all the insight they ever need, I think that's a flawed perspective, a very flawed perspective.
You've talked a lot about and like youth engagement, poverty reduction. Would you count those then as in this time so far as your proudest accomplishments, or I guess what would you say has been your proudest accomplishment in your tenure so far?
It's the youth engagement. I mean, there's some cool things that we've accomplished. We got a public safety levy passed, first time in 32 years. We got Trader Joe's to town, which they have historically said they didn't have any plans to come to Gresham. We got these national outlets that are coming and installing their locations here. Trader Joe's, not Trader Joe's, In and Out actually purchased their regional distribution center here in Gresham. They could have done that anywhere in the region, but they located here in Multnomah County in the city of Gresham. Cool accomplishments. Granger is here. They put their facility in. They're getting ready to open. Getting ready to do the grand opening. That can have anywhere from 150 to potentially 200 new employees. The connection between Rosemary Anderson High School and POIC and Microchip was a big accomplishment. And so now they have a direct pipeline opportunity for advanced manufacturing jobs directly from Rosemary Anderson High School and POIC, where you have the potential of making six figures within 3 to 5 years. I mean, these are some things that are just really cool and amazing. But the youth engagement, which has helped us see a dramatic decrease in youth violence, both from the perpetrator side and the victim side. So, why is that so important to me? Because we are saving lives every single day. We have now put an incredible dent in the pathway for youth, especially youth men of color, ending up either dead or incarcerated. So it's a two-sided conversation. I mean, it's not just those who would have and could have and may have been victim, but the perpetrator now has a different lease on life. And so when you go back and we were seeing 3, 4, 5, youth involved violent crimes on an annual basis, maybe more. Now we're seeing, one or two. I mean, those are lives that are saved on both sides of the issue there. So that's by far what I would say is our biggest accomplishment. But the poverty reduction, a lot of folks don't believe poverty reduction is really a city-based issue. So they believe that you've got nonprofits, you've got faith communities, you have all those things. But if you don't have the city focused on it, then yes, it is going to be something that perpetuates and it's going to negatively impact the city. But we've seen a reduction from 18%, no, 17%, I'm sorry, 17% down to less than 13%. That is a real reduction in poverty. That means we're getting people employed. We're getting people jobs. We're moving stuff forward, and not just a job, but family wage jobs, because you don't reduce poverty, with, below family wage jobs or below poverty wages. And so that's a positive impact because now folks are getting impacted multi-generationally. So we're giving them that foundation. We've actually increased home ownership among our people of color communities. So that's really the important things that we're doing. We've seen an increase in minority owned businesses. So that's another thing that's positive. So these are all the things that we're seeing as the positive outcomes of the efforts that we're talking about, because we're not giving people a leg out, we're giving people a hand up.
So just in working in news as well as kind of in largely around the nonprofit space over the last about 15 years, one of the common themes I've kind of seen with basically like, yeah, first electeds of color in any position has been this. You talked earlier about just the endorsement of the previous mayor and kind of like all that this is a lot of support. But one of the things that people have talked about is kind of like having that like that swell of support during the campaign, and then once the governing starts, a sense of, for lack of better terms, isolation. Like I think the cliche I hear a lot is, the only people that come to city council meetings are people who are angry about something. Would you say that's been accurate of your tenure?
So, I would say no. All of those folks that were there, pushing me forward when it was time to run, have consistently supported me throughout. That's one of the main reasons why we were able to get this public safety levy passed. Is that that's the same level of folks were the folks that were there when we were running campaign. Well, now that we're also governing, previous mayor, he is always available to me when it's time to govern. So I call him and say, "Hey, you face this at this point. What are some thoughts or ideas?" And so it's and I believe that's what gets us, solid results here in Gresham. Because our performance, I would put our performance over the last 5.5 years up against any city in the state. And with that said, I think a lot of it comes from that level of engagement. But I'm a collaborative person by nature. I mean, and so those folks that that were part of the journey are still part of the journey. Now they may not always show up at the council meeting, but I will, if there's something that I need to reach out for, I get on the phone and I call them up, say, "Hey, I need some insight on what you're thinking here. What's going on?" So I'll call up a very diverse group of folks all across the board to ensure that I'm getting, the insight and input that I need to be able to make the decisions that I need to make for our city.
And kind of with the theme of the story being around specifically black mayors in Oregon, I'm curious, do you talk with the other mayors, whether currently serving or previous, or it's not previous, but like had termed out, retired?
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. 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 We talk actually quite often.
Okay.
Quite often. Yeah, no, I mean, and part of that is we get, both Denise and I are on the Metro Mayors Consortium group. So that's 23 mayors here in the metro area. So we connect quite often on that. We're part of the Oregon Mayors Association. So I'll see both Denise and Alex here next month, in a couple weeks at the OMA conference down in Ashland. So we connect quite often, and then we're on a list serve, so we're constantly communicating that way. It's a constant communication chain, and we get an opportunity to kind of both, talk about our successes and our challenges, and commiserate every now and then about our experiences. And so those things are those, I mean, you have to have that support network to do what we do.
Okay. And for people, there's what, 200, I believe 81 cities in Oregon. So that's my math. 272 where the first black mayor is still yet to happen. But even just for whether it's someone running for mayor, running for city council, school board, I what advice would you give to someone running for office for the first time?
I mean, we've got to have our voice be heard. Our lived experience is an important component to designing the systems that we now exist in. So for anybody who has a notion to run for office. Ensure that you're sitting at the table where decisions are made. That's the key contribution that we have to be making. We can't be on a subcommittee. We can't be over here on this committee that only does a certain thing. No, we need to be at the table where decisions are made. So join the table, be at the table. Furthermore, the other couple pieces of advice I would give: you will face adversity. You will face things where people will say things that just aren't true. Folks come at me and they claim that I don't support public safety. I don't support law enforcement. Well, it's absolutely not true. But because of the color of my skin, they make an assumption based on that. And there'll be things, again, there's things that people say about me because of the color of my skin. They don't know me, but they'll say things about me, and those are things that I've got to press through. I've got to ignore sometimes and continue to lead forward. So if you're running for office, know that you will become somewhat of a lightning rod of other folks taking shots at you solely because they have perspectives and understandings that they believe are true about you as a person just solely because of the color of your skin. So you have to push through that because you will get, but stay strong, stay focused, move forward. And lastly, we need to continue to ensure that we're bringing a balanced approach to governing. I can tell you right now that I've got a passion for our black and brown folks all day, every day, because that's how I exist. And I know, and if you talk to folks who understand, they say, it's even in the good book, the Bible, it talks about doing something for the least of these, and that's the thing. I mean, if we're helping out the folks that face the biggest challenges in our community, we're building systems that benefit everybody, and that's key. Um, and so our focus needs to, I mean, you want to bring that passion to the table. So the advice, bring that passion to help others to the table. But also you have to govern for everyone. You have to govern for everyone. So I can't just be focused on our people of color and on my constituents of color. That it's a passion of mine. It's a desire that I support our community. While at the same time, I have to govern for everybody in our community. And so that's a piece that I'm consistently saying to folks, people of color that are running for offices. Yes, you can have a deep desire to help, especially our folks that have historically struggled, been lack of opportunities. But at the same time, you have to keep the entire community in mind as we're governing.
Mr. Mayor Travis Stovall, thank you again for taking the time this morning. Before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I think you just you closed it with a great question. Kind of what would be that advice, and that wrapped it up. That wrapped it up nicely. So great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe so we can help grow this channel. And if you want more content, make sure to follow Black Oregon POV on Instagram.